Okay, Matt.
Hello.
Hiya. So, do you want to introduce yourself, Matt?
Yeah, I'm Matt, and I'm a survivor of suicide.
Okay. So, Matt, we've talked and you've reflected recently that you feel suicide is kind of one of history's great unknowns, something that's not talked about. And you want to change that. You want to be part of the kind of movement that changes the stigma that's associated with suicide. So that's what we're here today to do, to have a discussion about hearing your own experiences and insights. That's okay?
That's
Good
fine.
stuff. Okay, so let's start with your experience of suicide, Matt, if that's okay.
That's fine. Yeah, my experience came actually not once but twice, but in the same time of year, so around this time of year of December and Christmas. And it was born out of years of emotional torture from a member of my family who conned me out of my mum's inheritance, and also was emotionally abusive, and basically even threatened my life, threatened to assault me, tried to get me to die of heat stroke one time in Milan. So the pressures were so much for me. The first time round I tried, it was about a year or so after my mum's death, and I woke up, I couldn't sleep, I got very anxious. I had a really bad conversation with my intern for where I was working at the time, and something that I felt really bad for, and my head just was just a mess. Like I say, I was under this torrent of abuse with no support, no help, feeling so alone, and I ended up not being able to sleep, and I woke up and all I could think about was going, because I was living near Hull at the time, and all I could think about was going off to the Humber Bridge and jumping off. And that time I woke up and and we hear about fight and flight, and that really did kick in for me. And at that time I was left with a choice. It was either jump off the bridge or get help. So I called 111, and I went to A&E eventually, and after being there all night, got help, got support. However, the support outside was never there, not even from where I was working, and the pressures never changed, and the abuse didn't improve because I refused to tell anybody about what was going on. So the year that followed, there was obviously broken promises, there was a lot of pain, there was a lot of times of feeling lonely. That next year, my job got cut because of the way I was emotionally. Although they didn't put it that way, they just said they wanted it to be over. So for me, I'd gone through a lot of stress. I'd lost a lot of money. I was facing being left on the street. I had no hope. I had nothing. And again, I had no support. The support, just any semblance of support I had left from me, and the support I probably could have accessed and should have accessed, I didn't, because I thought I need to deal with this alone. I was ashamed, I was embarrassed, and and I was hurt because of what had happened. Now, so the following year, basically for me, I actually got to a point where I was like, you know what, the feelings came rushing back inside of me. I had considered suicide throughout the year, and for various reasons I was actually thinking about, like, people driving by that knew me, if they saw me hanging somewhere, or accidents that could be caused if I was hanging off a bridge. So it was always stayed with me throughout the time, and that second year I actually just planned it out in my mind of what I was going to do, and I overdosed on sleeping pills. And for me, in that very moment, I felt regret. I thought, what am I doing? I mean, I was battling with it before taking them. You know, suicide is not something you just kind of, you know, unless you're a narcissist, it's not something you think, whee, it's fun. No, you battle in your mind about wanting to do it, not wanting to do it. It's not a decision that I would say comes too lightly, but it's one out of despair, and it becomes the easy option. So for me, when I did it, I took the overdose, I felt regret, and I started obviously feeling drowsy, realising the mistakes I made, and you have these flashes go through your mind of, you know, of things that you're leaving behind and things that you should have done. You know, and so in that moment, I called, got help, and, you know, obviously was taken to hospital, and that was the second time, but that became a wake-up call for me, and the journey that led me over. But the feelings of suicide didn't stop there, and there's things obviously we'll come to later, but for me they were the two main instances where I did it. And yeah, and that, like I say, it is just that feeling of regret, loss, and what am I doing, you know. And so yeah,
it's interesting, isn't it, because even though there are two distinct instances that you made an attempt to take your own life, it's also very much a situation that you were in that whole time, wasn't it? It was something that maybe your mind kept going back to.
Sure.
So you've talked about a couple of things, I think, the situation with a family member and abuse that you were experiencing, and we know that suicide is often as a result of like unresolved distress or unresolved trauma. So are there any other factors that you feel made you more vulnerable, perhaps?
Yeah, I mean, I would say for me, there was a couple of factors that made me extremely vulnerable, and also put suicide in my mind. And I think one of the major factors was, see, suicide is something that I'd even considered as young as a child because of child abuse and child trauma. And this is my personal story, but the truth is, I also have memories of when I was a child and I did something wrong, walking into the kitchen and my mum holding a knife to her wrist saying, do you want me to slit my wrist, do you want me to end her life? That happened in my life, that happened on more than one occasion. And when you are a child, you absorb this and you think, well, if I'm angry and I'm upset, this is a natural way of dealing with an issue. You know, you might say to me, well, Matt, that's a non-issue. No, it's not. And this is why we have to be careful, particularly with children and with people, how we portray and how we teach them how to deal with life. And because they will absorb it and they will mirror it. And for me, I mirrored that, and it was in my mind because I was brought up to believe I was worthless, I was hopeless, I was never good enough to achieve anything. I should accept who I am. Honestly, I didn't know who I was. It was only till recently that I realised that classes I was going to as a kid were based around what we know today as dyspraxia and autism. So it was called clumsy syndrome back then, and it was more dyspraxic, but then dyspraxia is linked to autism as well, but I've also been tested for that. However, you know, in all of that for me, it was almost the norm, so it was almost a build of abuse. You know, and then I looked at that, and then I looked at year in, year out of pain that I'd had as a child, to today, and those thoughts never left. And there has been times throughout my life where I've even given up car keys because the vision of wanting to end my life and how to do it have been so real. It's like it is a battle, and it is something you will go to. People go to suicide for different reasons. For me, it was a way of ending the pain that I was in at that time. And when you have a little pain, it gets accentuated. You pile on if it's not dealt with. And so for me, I wasn't dealing with it. Now for some people, it can be when they experience pain like never before. When they experience a deep pain, they can't control it, and so they look for a way out. And especially when we think about 2020 and people losing work, some people have been in jobs for 30 years, they're losing work, their mental health then is going to be affected greatly, and they think, how am I going to cope? Well, I've got life insurance, so my family are better off without me. These thoughts come in randomly, and it can be with anybody at any time. And so what I'm saying is, and why I said it, it's not just with my story, and with many, it comes from abuse. It can come from, substance misuse. But it also can come from a moment of despair and pain, and how we feel treated in a moment. There is no one given answer to suicide, but there are answers to find the things we can do to support them.
Absolutely, and I think that's true of mental health generally, isn't it? Is that it's everybody's, it belongs to everybody, and it affects people in many different ways. And it's so linked to thoughts and feelings, isn't it? And kind of where your head is at, and the kind of things that your mind is sort of thinking about quite a lot. So we describe with suicide as sort of a continuum, don't we? That somebody can go from having thoughts about death, to thoughts about suicide, to making plans, to thinking about what they need to have in place, to actual suicide attempts. And you've been kind of right down that continuum, Matt. So can you tell us a little bit about that, what that feels like, and what kind of things that you were doing at that time?
You mean throughout the whole process?
Yeah.
I think for me, there wasn't any given thing of what I was doing. It was less sometimes about action and what was around me. It was more about how I felt about me. It was more about how I thought the world saw me, or generally how the world did see me. It was the mind is a battlefield. The mind breaks. The mind is fragile, and I think for me, the feelings had. I was very, very vulnerable when I was attacked by this family member who I have no contact with now, and I left myself open. But I think for me, the thoughts, the feelings I had were ones of just loneliness, despair, feeling like nobody cares, feeling like I had no value, not understanding really who I was, and really just feeling unprotected, not only in the home, but in school, because historically I had gone through abuses by teachers, particularly in my first year in primary, to basically wherever I went, to even places that I would go to as a young person and feel safe, where somebody started a rumour about me and destroyed all of that. So I had all I saw was destruction in my wake, and that's all I knew, and I became sort of very negative, very down on the world, down on myself, and was away. And I used to push, and in some ways I still do a little bit, but I have worked on it, where I'll push people away that I get close to so I don't get hurt, and it became a natural reaction. But also I didn't want people to get close to me because I never wanted to hurt them. And so for me, with the thoughts of suicide came through a mix of confused feelings, but it was about trying to, in a way, thinking, well, the world, people are better off without me, and they won't even care if I'm dead. I was told as a child, well, by peers, but also by family, oh, if you die, we'll put the flags out, we'll celebrate. And that's all I knew, So for me, it was one of those that I didn't feel any support, and particularly the first time I considered it and was working towards it, when I was talking to my intern, when I kind of had to come down her and I felt rough afterwards, do you know what? I didn't react or overreact in a wrong way, and I know that, but I could have delivered it differently, and I know that too, where my head was. However, I really down myself. I walked through Hull for a while, and even to she was meeting the parents' team trying to find her to apologise, which wouldn't have been a smart decision at the time, but it was where my head was at. I then got home, and like I say, things escalated. So what I would say in that instant was, there are different mixed feelings, and it's hard to pinpoint for any one person, but it's sometimes about burrowing away, and it's something, and sometimes it's about looking at what the surface is, but then trying to dig deeper. But it's the importance of talking, and I think for me the feelings was, as I say, I was alone. I couldn't trust anybody. Nobody would understand. Nobody would care. Therefore, they'll be better off. They'll live okay without me. And obviously for me, not being around would make my life happier. And I looked at other options as well as suicide particularly, and people that commit suicide will consider other things like disappearing. Years ago, times you'll hear stories of somebody will not turn up to work and disappear. Most will usually either end up on the streets or somewhere else. That even crossed my mind, and I was planning that. There's more to just one thing, but yeah, so for me, with the feelings that I'd gone through, and I know this is a long way of saying it, I guess there's nothing really to pinpoint, but any instant could set me off in a moment. It was just the fact that I didn't feel, or didn't, I guess in that time, wasn't ready to accept support, because I'd never really felt supported in my life, and so I felt the only person I could rely on was me.
I think you've got really described that so beautifully and sensitively. This is what your world was, this is what your reality was, and these are the messages that you've been given for such a long time. When we sort of talk about suicide support, from a kind of mental health perspective, we often say that people give cues, and it's really important to listen out for cues that people might give that kind of expresses how they're feeling, maybe not explicitly. So people might say certain things, but they might also do certain things. Do you think, if you kind of were looking at yourself from an outside perspective at that time, what would you have seen or heard about yourself? Were you doing anything, like bizarre behaviours, anything like that might have given a cue to somebody that you were feeling this low?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I could always separate my professional work from my personal life. It was a switch that I could trip. So, in this time, I was actually working with a young person that was dealing with like suicide and self-harm. Yeah, it didn't trigger me, but yeah, and some people were saying, well, you can't help anybody because you're going through this. Actually, yes, you can. Whatever situation you go through doesn't mean that you're inept to help somebody else or to work through stuff. We all go, because otherwise, if we let our own personal pains drag us down to where we can't work, then a lot of people wouldn't be working or be going off sick quite often. But people who are going through it will find ways to separate work and home within their life. It's almost like a Jekyll and Hyde type personality, but not in the psychotic narcissist way, but more in that emotional state. So I was able to help her and support her through her journey to healing, which did help and was cathartic in a way. But in the other sense, for me, if I was to look at my cues, one of the things was I isolated myself a lot, stopped eating a lot, or eating. Basically, I would shy away from people. So even when I was working on certain days, like I would do literally what I needed to do, but then I wouldn't engage in sort of personal conversation with people. I pulled away from family, and like I say, I had a teacher from the school that I was supporting walk past me, and I was sat on a bench in the middle of the village, and she just walked past and said, "Oh, why are you sat here? Come with us, to the pub." And I'm like, no, I'm fine. But I was just so low, my head was down, and people walk by, and I think another key trigger point for me was I would also make journeys to the Humber Bridge. I would walk across it, get to the edge, look over, and I think one of the major things for me was obviously people walking by, but also was I would walk down the bridge sometimes at 2-3 in the morning, and I would look over the edge. I would walk back, and there was like a slant down to the path, up to the road, and I would look at the cars going by. In my mind, I'm hoping that a car comes over, the guardrail breaks, doesn't hurt anybody in the car, but the car lands on me, or I'd look over the edge. And one of the things I guess saved me in that instance of time was having dyspraxia. You have very bad depth perception. I'd see the rushing water, but also I'd see that high fence. But then I was always thinking, right, well, I need to bring a step stool next time, then I can get over, or a ladder. But the thing for me was, it was a key factor that you had somebody on their own, 2-3 in the morning, stood looking the edge of a bridge. Right next to me was a security camera, and in all those times I did it, and it was more than say 10 times, nobody came out and said, and checked, and that is one of the highest places for suicide in this country. And I'd walk down there and see flowers and stuff. So, but for me, seeing that was very much very much a pulling point, I guess, for me, to go there. But and there were also triggers, like I say, I would walk out of sometimes and just go off on my own for no random reason, or I'd struggle with my breathing. I was having issues with anxiety, because of this I was dealing with. And there was one person who was trying to connect with me, but sadly he passed away before we could arrange anything, in the management team. But like I say, there was enough small cues, small signals to show that I was struggling. But no support there was no support offered. The signals that come in can be so small, and some people can put on a happy face, but they're not happy inside. I think for me, the cue would be, look, to actually really want to invest in people and show people you care, get out of your comfort zone and talk to people, like whether it's your workplace or whatever. If you see somebody who seems really low, particularly in a place of harm, don't be scared, just talk to them and say, are you okay? Are you alright? And if they say yeah, and then say sure, yeah, and if they brush you away, fine. But if you're still unsure, you can call the police or call whatever, say you're concerned. But also what I'd say is, but even in that instant, that could trigger someone around, and I think I would say, somebody actually generally cared to come and talk to me. But for me, it's sometimes the small cues that make the big difference. But for me, the cues were being very different of a person to who I normally was. but also it was the fact of, you know, there was people who did try and contact me and I just pulled away. People were concerned, but it was like they'd meet with me once and give up. My thing is with it is when I triggered the way I was, I didn't want, you know, I wished people hadn't given up on me of just having one conversation, but actually said, do you know what, things aren't right and we need to do something, and if we're not equipped, we need to help to find somebody that is equipped to deal with it, or we need to call to get advice. You know, it's about, if you like, building relationships, but also, you know, it's just about being sensitive to people. Yeah, and like I say, triggers are different for everybody, but for me, I got good at hiding it and they will hide it. But I would also say, learn to look at somebody's eyes, learn to look past the smile, because if you see sadness in their eyes, then you know something's wrong, because the eyes are the windows to the soul. And, you know, if I could ever offer advice, and I think something where I've actually helped others because I understand it, is not to creepily stare at them, but to look, and when you see a glaze of sadness or fear, you know that either you've triggered something or there's something there. And it's just, you know, but just to say the words, you know, are you okay? And she said, yeah, I'm fine. Say, are you sure? What's happening with you? And say, okay, well, listen, and it's just even sometimes say to somebody in a conversation, if you are going through anything, you know, just come talk to me, you know, whatever. And that can make the life a difference. And I wish people had actually said that to me. So.
Yeah. And we know that the kind of Selfish Act, what would you say to them?
Do you know, what I would say to them is it's anything but a selfish act, because when I think of a selfish act, it's something to do with about the person and about them not caring about anybody else or thinking about anybody else. It's about them, and that's all that matters. But for somebody that takes their own life, it can be perceived as selfish, but the truth is it's not, it's selfless. You know, they are thinking about what they're really thinking about in that moment is life is better if I'm not in it. Like people's lives, people will forget about me. You know, I was told, well, you know, by family and others, you know, if you died, we'll put the flags out. But also, you know, it's that feeling of worthlessness. It's that feeling of low self-esteem. It's that feeling of like no hope. But ultimately, like as I say, we live in this time where people are, particularly now, like losing jobs after however many years with uncertainty. There are acts that will cause people, it's not just long-term mental illness, it's not history of past, but even a simple act can turn a person that may be defined sane to act in a way that is irrational, but they think, you know what, if I end this now, then, you know, my family will be better off maybe because they've got life insurance or whatever. They, you know, you just feel like low despair, there's just no hope. You know, and so in that you're being selfless, you're thinking about the needs of others and thinking about how much, whether it's right and it's not rational thinking, I get it, but in that moment you're just looking at, you know, as I say, what is best for those around you, but also it's not about, but also like I say, it's a mix of emotion and it's that overwhelming feeling that, you know, you just can't see any other way, that there is no hope. So it's not a defined selfish act of saying I'm doing this just because no rational person would necessarily do that. They do it because A, they want to get out of a problem, or, you know, and B, it is sometimes they feel it is the only way out and they can't face what is ahead, or like I say, they feel what's best for somebody else. And so I'm going to say this, that we need to be willing to reach out, to have those conversations, to tell them these questions, and really, and really just to remove perceptions of being that it's a selfish act, and to try and understand, and maybe even ask people if you know them, people that have done it, ask them why, to describe their feelings, find out, but also look at the fact that whoever's doing it are crying out for help. I've also something I'd say, some people say, well, if people talk about it and say they're going to do it, well, they're not, because they're talking about it. Do you know what? Yes, there's those people that do talk about it and there's those people that don't, but either way, both need help. The quiet ones, yes, will go ahead and do it, but there's those that are loud, or say they're doing it very lightly. Don't say one against the other, and I've seen that said so many times. Let's look at it based on its merit, and you will know that by talking to them, by asking them about if they've got a plan, what are their thoughts, and why they feel that what it is in that moment. It's about building that rapport, that trust, that relationship, and that can be done quickly, but it's about reading past the mask, reading the eyes, reading the non-verbal body language. And one of the things that I have learned, I will encourage anybody to do, is actually, if you're having a conversation and you see eyes glazed over, or you get a sense that something's wrong, go with that sense, stop the conversation, say, now tell me what's going on, really, what's wrong, what's going on inside you right now, what is it you want to tell me? Because people will open up, because some people, they want to say it, but they don't know how, so they'll tell you what you want to hear. But it's about finding out what needs to be said, not what wants to be said. So yeah.
That's great. I think, and I think you've touched on it so beautifully, but often it's described as well, if someone makes an attempt on their own life or talks about suicide, as a cry for help. Mm-hmm. And what we need to do is listen to that cry for help, isn't it? And it might be a form of communication, but if that's how somebody is choosing to communicate, we need to help teach better ways of communication so that people don't feel the need to go to those lengths to get the help that they need. Yeah,
absolutely. I think as well, it's one of those where we need to be mindful of our own world of friends, family, but also work colleagues, about how can we be a culture of inclusiveness, how can we open to try with people, to help people, to talk to people. There might be somebody who we see we don't know. Introduce yourself, talk to them. It might be uncomfortable, but you know what? We've got to get out of comfort zones. We've got to be willing to step out. And it's having those conversations of saying, how are you? How are you doing? And if they say, oh, fine, blah, blah, blah. But then to say, no, okay, but if it said, well, to have the conversation, well, you seem down. You seem down, are you okay? Are you sure? And they say, yeah. I said, and really, and sometimes you'll get that, but eventually people will open up. But also it's saying, well, okay, well, listen, if you do ever want to talk, just have a chat, have a coffee, just come grab me. And it's being open and willing to that, but it's also being willing to say the other way, of saying, do you know what, if you're struggling, that you can talk to them, because truthfully, people who are struggling are not inept from helping. Bottom line, they're not inept. They can actually help as well. I have been the one that's proved that in the way I help young people in spite of my pain, because you can flip that switch, but also that can be cathartic in itself. It's about working together and being one in unity together. And that starts with those around you, and it makes you better equipped to help others around you. And also, if you are helping people and you are struggling, and you're like, I don't have the answers, I don't know what to do, just have that conversation, just listen and say, hey, listen, all you have to say is, why don't we hold on to this? Why don't we talk in a couple of days, or tomorrow, or the next day, or whatever, and let's have a chat about this further. And if you're feeling down or whatever, hold on to the fact that you've got somebody you're going to talk to. That makes the world a difference, because it gives hope and focus. But in that time, it's great, because then you can seek the advice and support about what you've gone through. So you're not thinking, scrabbling in that moment of, I need to have the answers. You don't. All you need to do is say, right, I've got resources. How can I end this on a note that's right, and how can I take it, help take them further, and actually have more tools in my toolkit? We learn, we grow together, we grow for the best of the people we work with. Trust me, if I'd had some people around me at that time who'd just listened and been there, not quit on me over one time, or, you know, people that had seemed to fob me off, do you know what? I would have been a lot stronger. And if somebody had said the words to me, and I've said it to young people before, I'll talk to you in a couple of days. And I've made sure that I have done that I've set a time and I've listened, but I've used that time constructively to prepare, to help them based on the knowledge I don't have. You know, and there are organisations you can call. You don't have to give confidential information. Yes, there's things you'll need to do in terms of safeguarding, I'm sure, but in some cases, in a lot of cases as well, you can not give confidential information, but you can talk of the scenario and get key advice on the steps to take going forward and where best to support them with, and maybe that's supporting them to call their GP to make an appointment, and if it's somebody you know, going with them, or with, say, somebody that is a client, if it's a client that you are supporting one-to-one, again, to go with them, or maybe it's somebody, if it's somebody over the phone, or even asking who they feel comfortable taking with them, making sure they're not going on their own, that they are supported. But also, as I say, if it's calling the crisis team, that you can say, well, I'm willing to do this with you, or is there somebody? But again, remember, it is their choice. It is their choice on the decisions they make. All we can do is the best we can to support them. And when we've done that, you know, we can know that what if the result sadly comes a tragedy, and they decide, you know what, don't ever take that on yourself and think, if I could have done this, this and this. No, by just being there and trying, you've done all you can. You've shown them hope, you've shown them love, you've shown them that there is another way. But in that moment, they have made that choice. But I want to tell you that the more we stand, the more we actually reach out, the more we hold our hand out, then do you know what? That number of people that will end up going that way is greatly, greatly reduced. And the percentages will far outweigh in them people getting help, getting support, moving forward. It's going to be a long journey. It's not an overnight fix. But they will get there, and it's that encouragement to know and just staying the course as much as possible, but also, you know, and also, like I say, it's just about relationships. But you may not, and sometimes you may not even realise that today, one word you say, if you pass someone on the bridge, just saying, you know, are you okay? You know, can I help? Something, just a few words. You know, you may not see it today, but you will change a life, and you will change a life and give somebody a better tomorrow, because they know there is hope. They know there is people that genuinely care, that there is goodness in people, and they just need to reach out. And as professionals, you know, you are the first port of call, or if you're not a professional, listen to this, you can, whoever you are, make a difference in those around you. You don't have to have a degree, you don't have to be professional, whatever, or, you know, you just have to be there and be willing to listen and being open to listen. And if you feel there's training you need, particularly in like body language, reading past the mask, looking at like any non-verbal, including the eyes, reach out and say, we need training in this. Challenge your managers to find the training that is available, find the resources that is available, it's out there. You know, and like I say, if you don't, contact Connect 5 or, you know, certain companies will help with support that. Basically, it's that passion about making a difference, following your gut, and like I say, knowing that if you leave somebody and you're still not happy, particularly if it's a stranger, and you're not happy with, and you'd still feel in that gut, this isn't right, dial 999, let them know that there is a person at risk, let them deal with it. You're then doing everything in your power within safeguarding to save a life. And while you may not get thanks in the moment, believe me, you will change your life. So I would encourage you to keep on going. You know, it's by people coming beside me and helping me when I started finally opening up, and I realised I couldn't hold it. You know, there's still stuff I work through today, but you know what? I've realised there are people that I can open up to and I can be real with, and for me that's what keeps me going and stops me feeling that I've got to go back to where I was. I don't want to go back, and I'd speak to a lot of people that I've seen that have gone through it, and when they've seen that hope of tomorrow, they don't want to go back. Yes, they might have those feelings, but they learn tools to deal with them. But it has to start somewhere, and it can start here, and it can start now.
Thanks for making a difference, Matt.
Thank you.